October is set to finish with lots of swings, including the potential for a big storm setup into next week. This comes as the jet stream will be active not only the next few days, but also as we go into the last few days of the month. This video will overview anything from near-term weather to the long-range storm signal.
One Nation weather.
Thank you for joining me in this update. I hope everybody's having a great start to the week. I want to jump right into this update by breaking down how the jet stream is set to evolve as we go through the rest of October. Any swings that happen with the jet stream will dictate what occurs at the surface. Of course, we're already seeing some swings ongoing in the near term this week. I discussed these forecast swings in my last video on Saturday. Here we are on Monday evening looking ahead to the forecast for the middle of this week, where the jet stream is set to be diving down over a lot of the central and eastern U.S. This dip in the jet stream, or trough, is going to bring through a quick low-pressure system as we continue to go out of Monday through Tuesday and into Wednesday. As that moves through the eastern U.S., there could be some showers, there could be some gusty winds, but the bigger change coming with this dip in the jet stream will be the cooler temperatures. I'll discuss those again in just a couple of minutes. As I continue this overview for now, though, one thing you'll note is that the big dip in the jet stream that will be in the east midweek is set to begin moving off the coast by the end of the week. Around that time is when a quieter pattern should move in for most zones for the time being. One exception will be where we get some cutoff jet stream energy trying to move into some parts of the central U.S. That could spark a storm system there, although that doesn't necessarily look to be significant. Of course, as the title and thumbnail of this video indicate, there is another significant signal still on the line for some point through the rest of October, though. Can you see it starting to enter the western part of the U.S. on your screen by the time we go out of Saturday and Sunday and then towards Monday? I certainly can, and in fact, this guidance indicates that we will have a huge dip in the jet stream out of the southwest U.S., out through the mountain west, and then into parts of the central plains as we go towards around our Monday, October 27th. This could certainly be associated with a big storm system, some temperature clashes, and eventually this guidance indicates that jet stream energy moving east. I'll break down this possible setup for next week in more detail later in the video. First, though, let's take a look at the latest future radar overviews for active weather areas with that jet stream energy in the near term. As we play things out from our Monday when I'm recording this and into Tuesday, there will be a bigger low pressure system moving out of the north central U.S. and into the Great Lakes region. That's on the leading edge of that big jet stream dip that's moving in for midweek. As that low pushes into parts of the Great Lakes area, that's where there is going to be the chance for some scattered showers as enough moisture will get sequestered northbound. Overall, though, this thing is going to be very dry. Even the cold front that extends further south is barely going to produce scattered showers as it pushes up against the Appalachians and through parts of the deep south Tuesday afternoon. This system, as I noted in the last video, it is indeed going to be more of a wind maker as it swirls around in some parts of the eastern U.S. out of Tuesday into Wednesday. There could be some heavier rain in the northeast as some moisture gets pulled up from the Atlantic there. That's going to be out of Wednesday and into our Wednesday afternoon and evening. Eventually, low pressure is going to weaken, but there's still going to be some cooler air left around for the eastern U.S. at the end of the week. As we begin to see things warming back up further west, that's when we are going to get that cutoff energy moving out of the southwest and into the south central plains region. This certainly doesn't look too significant, but there's going to be an area around Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Missouri where there's some active weather out of Thursday into Friday, possibly even Saturday and early Sunday. This is going to be a slow-moving storm, and it could bring the impacts of some flooding and isolated severe weather before it begins breaking up by the end of the weekend. As it does break up, there could be some spotty rainfall over some parts of the southeastern quadrant of the country. By the end of the weekend, though, I think that's when we're going to be looking west for the long-range signal that I'll break down more in just a few minutes. As I stressed in my last update, the big change that's going to happen with the jet stream energy, and especially that storm system that moves through during the rest of the early to midweek time frame, that is the temperature shift over the eastern U.S. Temperatures, as you can see on this graphic, are expected to be around 5 to 10 to 15 degrees below average from the Mississippi River Valley eastbound by late week around our October 23rd. I do want to take the latest look at forecast temperatures associated with those anomalies for the rest of this week. Starting with a look at the morning lows expected as you wake up on Tuesday, October 21st. Keep in mind, it's not going to be cold just yet, at least for October standards up in parts of the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes. With that low pressure just starting to move in, morning temperatures will still be in the 40s to near 50 up there. Look at what you'll warm up to on Tuesday afternoon, though, as the low pressure and its stronger winds push in. Only the 50s to the low 60s over much of the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes, even some 40s for peak highs in parts of the Dakotas and Minnesota. That's that cooler air already starting to push in. You'll really feel it over much of the central and eastern U.S. by the time we go into Wednesday morning. Look at this, from parts of the north central plains stretching over to the upper Midwest, all the way down to the Ohio Valley region, looking at widespread 40 and below temperatures. That's on your Wednesday morning. As we go into Wednesday afternoon, it's not going to warm up too much over this zone either. Here's the area where there's going to be lots of low to mid 60s. That encompasses much of the Midwest, down to the Tennessee Valley, over to the Mid-Atlantic. North of there, highs are only going to get up into the 40s and 50s. Again, this is a pretty notable cool down coming. Temperatures at least more normal for November in comparison to a day like October 22nd. Thursday morning, you're going to note the cold all the way down here towards the Gulf Coast and the southeast coast of the U.S. Morning lows are going to be in the low to mid 40s in much of those zones as we go into the 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock time frame in the morning. Further north, closer to the freezing mark, there's going to be multiple days of freezing and frost conditions as we finish this week up in these zones. What about Thursday afternoon? It's going to be yet another cold one, especially up in the northeastern quadrant of the U.S., highs in the 50s and 60s. Note by the end of this week, though, as you go further west through the upper Midwest, the north central plains, and of course further south from there, temperatures are going to be warming up as the jet stream lifts back north. With the near-term weather in mind, let's take a look at some blended guidance that's different from the jet stream guidance I showed at the beginning of the video. This still shows how anomalies are set to occur in the jet stream with time, though. As we go towards the end of this week, a lot of the western and the central U.S. will be recovering from any recent cooldowns, and we're actually going to have a big warm-up. These oranges and reds indicate an anomalous ridge or northbound push in the jet stream that's going to be occurring in those zones as we go out of Friday into Saturday and Sunday. Changes are going to be imminent as we go out of the end of this week and into the weekend, though. Can you see where they're going to be coming from? I certainly can. This already looks pretty nasty and gnarly coming down. From Alaska through the western part of Canada and then down to the northwest U.S., there's going to be an anomalous area of troughing. That's what these blues indicate. Even those greens, that indicates sharper contrast where the jet stream is really going to be digging into the western U.S. as we finish this week. Certainly means a lot of rain, potential for flooding, and then of course the high elevation snow that we get this time of the year. That could even impact parts of California, Oregon, and eventually the rest of the Mountain West. We'll likely continue to see impacts and continually cooling conditions moving through parts of the west as the jet stream dips down into that region by the end of the weekend. Around that time is when the guidance I showed earlier, as well as this guidance, indicates the leading edge of that huge trough or dip in the jet stream emerging out into the central U.S., pushing against a zone with now warmer than average temperatures by that point in time around Monday. I've seen this kind of setup before, and if this does indeed pan out, this does look like the setup that would involve a big storm system or possibly multiple storm systems on the leading edge of that jet stream dip, moving across parts of the U.S. into next week. As I continue the playthrough of this blended guidance, you can see that it indicates that blue area, that big dip in the jet stream, making it all the way to the east coast, but that would be pretty slowly, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, finally making it over towards the east coast. If it takes that long to progress, we could definitely see active weather, the potential for flooding, multiple days of severe weather crossing some zones from the central to the eastern U.S. on the leading edge of that trough. And then eventually when the trough moves in, of course, gusty winds, cooler air pushing in possibly. This definitely looks like a dynamic setup and something worth watching across much of the country. Again, I don't want to get into specifics this far out. I just want to briefly show you here the European model and one of its latest runs, what it shows for the possible stormy setup out of this weekend into next week. On the leading edge of that trough and the jet stream energy, it shows a continuous atmospheric river of moisture and even that high elevation snowfall pushing into the west this weekend. With time, it has some surface low pressure eventually forming as that energy pushes out of the Rockies and out into the plains. That is a strong low pressure system right there. Whenever you get that big comma shape forming, that indicates a negatively tilted trough. There would almost certainly be strong winds, severe weather, flooding risks associated with this type of system. That's why we need to watch it. It's only about a week out, although there are, of course, a lot of uncertainties with it. Eventually, the European model would also have that low shifting around and then eventually kind of swirling over towards the east coast of the U.S. where it could get messy there by the end of that week. Again, certainly something to watch. With that being said, that's all I have for this update on the near-term and long-range weather. In the headlines recap for this video, headline number 1 is that, of course, the rest of October will be very active for many zones, with more jet stream dips and associated impacts. We've got that near-term storm about to bring the showers, gusty winds, and the cool down to the central and eastern U.S. There's that weak storm for the central plains out of the end of this week into the weekend. And then, of course, there's that new long-range signal that has formed looking ahead to the last week of the month. That storm in particular has the potential to be a high impact storm system. We could even see multiple low pressures associated with that big dip in the jet stream. It's certainly something to watch, and a lot of model guidance shows even the beginning of November being active. If you want to stay up to date as we go through the rest of fall and into winter, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button down below so you catch consistent, accurate videos right here on the channel. You'll especially get them delivered to you if you hit that notification bell. Also, check out the link to Weather Bell Maps down in the description of this video. That is a free trial to model maps like the ones I use in my content. Anyways, that's all I got in reminders. Thanks so much for tuning in. Leave any comments and questions below. God bless you.
One nation weather.